Welcome to Equipped in Grace, where we talk about following Jesus in the chaos of real life. I'm Vinny Pisarski, and if you've ever wondered how to bring your Sunday faith into your Monday meetings, your parenting, your relationships, or just your everyday mess, then this podcast is for you. So let's get outside of the church pew and get equipped for discipleship in the wild world in which we live. Have you ever had something all planned out, or decided how you wanted your life to go, only to have something come along and, shall we say, change your perspective, and thus rearrange how you thought things were going to go? Well, that's what we're going to talk about on this episode of Equipped in Grace, so without further ado, let's dive right into today's conversation. Today on the show, we have Tybo Wilhelms, who is a retired attorney.
That's right.
Who tells me that my cousin Vinny is a very unlikely scenario in real life.
That's not what happens in a courtroom.
That's so unfortunate. But I also believe it. There's no, you said in our conversation prior to this, you said there's no gotcha moments.
Not in my 50 years. I didn't see it once.
Not once did somebody just went, I did it.
I confess.
I killed so-and-so.
Give me my just dues. I never saw that at all.
Dang. Well, I that probably makes a little bit more sense than what television would have us believe. But I can see why they make that adjustment for TV.
It's entertainment. It
is entertainment, yes. The average court case probably doesn't go like Judge Judy or other things like that.
Not at all.
Yes.
Not at all.
So let's jump off right from there. 50 years as an attorney. And I was reading, you did an entry in our church devotional that I found very interesting because you grew up in a household where you said an undisciplined life is a wasted life, which I thought was very wise. It seems very practical. So you, from a young age, had your trajectory planned out.
It was up to me to plan it out.
Right.
There was no ad-libbing in your life.
Mm-hmm.
If you didn't know where you were headed, then you were headed nowhere.
Ooh.
I can't remember how many times either my mom or my dad would say that if you don't know where you're going, then you're going nowhere.
And there is truth to that.
There is.
Yes.
It can get a little overboard at times.
Yes.
But as a basic premise, I still believe that if you don't know where you're going nowhere.
Yeah. And knowing where you're going, as we'll find out probably as we go, can be a little bit more of a group conversation as opposed to just this is what I think I'm doing kind of thing.
That's right.
So I'm guessing at some point you plan that you're going to go and you're going to be an attorney, you're going to go to law school, you're going to do all that. Was that the plan? How that developed early on? That
became the plan. Okay. The original plan was I was going to either be a performer in a symphony band or a high school band director. I thought those were great things to be. I was a fairly accomplished high school musician myself, and so I headed that way. But when I went to college in the fall of the year that I went to college, they mixed up my housing card, and instead of being put in with the music students, I was put in with the pre-law students, and they asked me if I would just stay there for one semester, they'll get me in the right place in January. And what do I care? That's fine. I'm just amazed being a college student now. That's wow.
Right. You're just happy to be there.
And then I listened to the roommates' conversation, and I said, that's a really interesting conversation. And then I would start participating in it, even though I hadn't read the materials. And one thing led to another. And when it came January, I said to the folks who were in charge of assigning classes, can I stay where I am? And I had to take the fall classes and the winter classes at the same time.
Okay.
I had to surrender my music scholarship, which was the hardest part of the decision. But I'm very glad that I did. I didn't know it at the time, but I now look back on it. That was probably the first time that God intruded in my life in a very significant way and said, you're on the wrong path, Tybo. Let's get you on the right path.
Yes.
That is not what I felt at the time.
Right.
But looking back on it, I realized, that's what that was. I mean,
right.
How does that make any sense that you get the wrong housing card into just the right group of people?
Well, what a small and incredibly significant coincidence. We said, I forget which episode it is, but we did say that on an episode, I think it was with Pastor Dan, that God is in the interruptions.
Okay.
that we don't. Just like Mary's life, Mary, the mother of Jesus, very interrupted. She had a plan. She was going to get married to Joseph, probably live a quiet Jewish life in the town, in the region that they were in, married to a carpenter, right? That was the plan. And then...
Good plan. Great plan.
Nothing wrong with that plan. Interrupted. So God interrupts your plan to be a band director, and now you're on the track to be an attorney.
And off we go.
And off we go, yes.
Didn't plan on having children when I did, but we had children when we did, and it turned out great. They're wonderful boys, raising wonderful families of their own. So once again, the plans are, well, the base verse of the devotion I wrote is, I know the plans for you that I have for you, says the Lord, plans to prosper you.
Yes. Give you a future and a hope.
And my life has been nothing but, there have been moments that have not been prosperous moments.
Sure.
But that's picking nits. The overall arching story of my life has been one of prosperous. The Lord has been, he wears himself out blessing me. I don't have any doubt about that.
That's a wonderful way of putting it. So then at some point, there sounds like in your story, there was somewhat of another interruption or a new thought. You mentioned Proverbs 3:5, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. And this kind of shook up your view of your life at that time. What was that like, and then where did it lead to?
I must confess that prior to that time, I had a very high opinion of my own opinion.
Yes.
I was the gift that a lot of people were waiting to receive.
Oh boy.
Yeah. It was very, I don't like remembering that time, but I like remembering the change. The moment that is in the devotional has to do with a time in this church's history when it was in the midst of a building committee, a building process. And I was the chairman of the building committee, and we were encountering some resistance. Can I say that? Okay.
Yes.
And how to deal with that resistance in what was a church-like religious way. I use those words at that time because I had not entered into a personal relationship. I knew about God, but I didn't know God.
Sure.
If you catch the...
Yes.
Yeah, right. And so one night, my late wife said, Tybal, you need to get alone and pray seriously about how you should conduct yourself as a chairman of this committee. We want to do good for the church, not bad. And right now it's 6 of one, half a dozen of another. I'm not sure what it is. And so I came to this sanctuary right here, 4th row on the left from the front. And for 2 nights in a row, I spent a couple hours. And at the end of the second night, it became crystal clear to me that the problem I was having was that I was taking my own advice. I was looking in my mirror at home and saying, this is a good idea. That is a bad idea. Oh, this is an even better idea. And that night in this sanctuary, in the 4th row, I remember exactly where I was sitting. The Lord said to me, have you read Proverbs 3 lately? Well, no, I don't know that I've ever read it. And by the time I got to verse 5, which says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. Trust in the Lord. Trust was something that was hard for me because it meant I had to surrender control. And which was awfully close then to not being in control.
Yes.
And I didn't think my parents would enjoy that because I suddenly was not planning where I was going. Somebody else was planning where I was going.
Right.
And even though I was in my late 30s by then, my mother's voice and my father's voice still ring in my ears today.
Yes.
And I suspect that's true for everybody.
Yeah, I agree.
But their voice rang very loud and clear, but not as loud as the Lord's. And I can remember that night right there, I fell to my knees and I cried because I realized I had been self-sufficient and I wanted to become God-sufficient and lean not on my own understanding, but on his. I was hoping that he would lay it out for me crystal clear, write it in a book, put it in a movie screen, somehow or other so it was clear. But that's, of course, as you know, not the way God reveals his will.
I think I haven't talked to anybody yet that got the play-by-play from God ahead of time.
Yep. He says, I have a journey for you, and all I require of you is to take the first step. Then I'll show you the second step. And when you get to step 2, then I'll show you step 3. That didn't sound like planned to me.
No, not at all. Not the way we were comfortable with.
That's right. But that is, since that night, now it wasn't like a Saul on the road to Damascus moment, but it was a rejection of what I had been doing and a willingness to start learning how to do it differently, how to listen to God.
A willingness to start learning how to do it differently.
Yeah.
I wanted to point that phrase out because I think that is well put and is probably a great starting point for a lot of people listening, wondering, how do I go about following God more? I think that's it. A willingness to start doing things differently. We can't get there. We'll never get out the front door.
Yeah.
Ooh, that just being able to take that moment and be willing to do it differently. Thank you for that. So you're now there, beginning to be willing to do it differently. Where does that then lead? Does that affect where your career is headed?
Well, the first change that I recall was that I began to read and understand Scripture in a different way.
Okay.
Previous to that moment, I had been reading Scripture kind of from a self-justification standpoint. I was reading the Scriptures in a way that would say to me, Tybal, you're doing it right. You got it right. See, the Scriptures say, I'm on target. After that, I said, I need to come to the Scriptures with less of me and more of God in the reading. And slowly but very surely, my understanding of who he is changed to where I entered into a personal relationship. It's to compare it to where I am today is no comparison at all. I'm quite a bit deeper than I was then. I mean, but slowly and surely, I've always loved to research. For whatever reason, language is something I really enjoy. It's the closest thing we come to the tangible expression of thought, our words, and words matter. The legal profession was good for me but the Scriptures even more so. I have a Greek to Hebrew to English reference books that help me go back to the originals. I keep in mind that every English Bible that I read is a translation of a translation, and I need to be open to, is it possible that it got shaded a little bit in one of the multiple translations? So that was the process that I got into that led me into teaching Sunday school here at Grace Church. It led me into teaching Sunday school, and we got a neighborhood group of guys that gets together, and I tend to convene and lead that until finally it struck me, what am I doing during the day in the courtroom when I should be and doing what pastors do? I need to stop being a lawyer and start being a pastor. And so now I've got a couple of cases that it wouldn't be fair to my clients to just walk away from. So I'll wind down a while. I won't take any new cases, but I'll finish the ones I've got. And during that process, my wife, again, my late wife, said to me, Tybal, we're going to go where you say the Lord is leading you. I would just like to be certain that it is the Lord leading you and not some made-up fantasy of your own as to what we're doing.
Sure.
Debbie, her name was Debbie, was one of the most, she was one who really put meaning in the phrase personal relationship with the Lord from her earliest days. And so she's not, if in your prayers, this is what the Lord confirms, we're going.
Okay.
But would you pray about that? Well, I knew that it seems silly as I say it now, but the fourth row on the left side is where God talks to me. So I went there. It was in November of 1987, 7:30 in the evening, 7:31 to be precise.
Oh, wow.
And the Lord just kind of, I don't know that I've ever really heard the audible voice of God, but if I ever have, it was then, because there was no doubt what he was saying. Tybal, I've got all the pastors I need. I haven't got that many lawyers. And as a lawyer, you get to go into places, speak to people that pastors don't. They can talk to him, but the people they're speaking to put on masks. They put up fences, and they say the things that are supposed to be said. You will get to them when they're a little more real, who they really are.
Yeah.
I want you to stay as a lawyer. And I prayed for a number of days that I heard him wrong. And I didn't hear him wrong.
Yeah.
I was supposed to stay right where I was. And I did.
Yeah.
I stayed a lawyer. Well, you don't get to 50 years by quitting halfway through.
Right.
So I stayed that way. And there were innumerable times where he brought me into situations where I could witness to him in an unusual setting. I'm not going to use any names, but there are a number of clients who in the midst of our conversations would say to me, Taibo, I've always wondered, why do you wear that cross on your lapel of your coat? And I always said the same thing. I said, I appreciate you asking me, and I'll let you withdraw the question, because if you do not withdraw the question, I will answer it. And some of them at that point would say, okay, never mind. I'm fine. You look, that's fine.
Yeah.
But there were 4 or 5 in particular, I'm thinking, that said, I'd like to know yes, tell me.
Yeah.
And I can recall one in particular. The reason we were meeting is because he, quote, had to divorce his wife. He had to do that.
Right.
And And when we had the conversation about the cross, it took 5 or 6 months, but they reconciled.
I'll be darned.
And to this day, they're still together.
Huh.
To this day. And he will still occasionally, they're on my I'm on their Christmas card list. They're on my Christmas card list. Not that being on a Christmas card list is a significant thing, but it does show that if for no other reason than that one man and that one marriage that got saved, that continues.
Yeah.
That's worth it right there.
Yeah.
Now, I'm confident without knowing that there have been other moments, other situations where it mattered.
Yeah.
I'm not keeping track. I'm not keeping score. That's not what it's about. But it fits into God's plan for my life better than being a pastor. If I was a pastor, that man would never have opened up to me.
Right. Yeah, and I noticed that even just as a Christian, like where I work now, and this has always been true throughout my life. Anytime I'm in a position where people know that I'm a Christian, they will apologize anytime they swear. Like people's behavior changes just a little bit. And that's not too bad. But imagine like if I was a pastor, some people just put the guard up. People put the wall up a little bit.
They do.
Because they feel like they have to behave a certain way. And then the pastor's not getting to engage them.
The real them is not there.
Exactly. The real them is not there. So they're not getting to engage them with what they're really going through, with where they're really at and with what they really need. So that's just quite amazing. And I love hearing stories about people who answer that call to view their life as a ministry, people that they meet as part of that ministry, and not just like, this is my job, this is what I go do, and I go to church on the weekends. Yeah. The whole point of this podcast is to help people see that, no, the two things are intertwined. What we do on Sunday and what we do throughout the rest of the week are not separate.
Mm-hmm. That's right. It's our life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's what it is to follow Christ, to have that willingness to change at the beginning and then to begin reorienting our life, see that God is part of all the interactions throughout the week.
Exactly. Now that's been refined for me in the last 3 or 4 years, because when shortly after I retired, it dawned on me, well, you're done. You're not doing what you used to do. You're used up. Your end has come. You're not digging a grave for yourself, but your usefulness is gone. And for a time, that kind of consumed my thoughts. That, well, who listens to a year-old man anymore? I'm just a retiree after all. I've had my place on the stage, and now I shuttle off to the off wings and move on along. And I returned to the 4th row on the left side.
Of course.
And I got a little chastisement from the Lord. He said, he speaks to me in a voice that I understand. I think he does that with everyone. He speaks to the way you understand. And pretty much I heard him say, "What is wrong with you, Taibo? I am not done with you yet. When I am, you'll know."
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Don't get caught up in your sorry. Just stay. I've still got plans for you. They're not the plans I had back when you first sat in this pew, but they're new. I'm doing a new thing, Taibo. Come along. That's who I am. I do new things. Join me. And I'm glad I listened. If you ever wander in here and see me in the fourth row on the left side at night by myself, which is hard to do now that they locked the place up, by the way. I'm referring to times when they didn't. But if you ever see that, just
let you be.
Let me be for a while.
Yeah.
I'm busy.
Not the time to ask for stuff.
I'll come out and then you can talk to me. But at the moment, when I'm in that fourth pew on the left, leave me alone.
A conversation is already taking
busy.
place.
That's right. If you want to say, "God, I'm interrupting," you take the risk yourself.
Well, thank you so much for sharing it. That is what a wonderful story. Something that someone who's in their late 30s, kind of in the similar season of life where your story hit a crossroads. I deeply appreciate you sharing it with us. And I'm sure there are many others who do, because you've been through many seasons of life. And I love that you added the bit at the end that God's not done. He's always doing new things. Just because we're old in earthly years does not mean we're old in God's sight.
That's right. And
does not mean that God is done with what he has planned for us. He's always doing new things. What is that Jesus said to be new wines? You don't put old wine into
new wine into old wine skins. Yeah.
So to have that mindset that God is always doing something new, and that we just have to stay loose. We just have to trust him, right?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Because he's going to do a new thing.
And the reason you can trust him is that he never goes back on his promises. Never, as in never.
Yeah. So that Jeremiah 29:11, still all these years later, holds true. God still has a plan, a future for me, for you, for everybody listening, if we're willing to take that step and trust him.
Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding.
Lean not on your own understanding. Wise counsel from the book of Proverbs that proved very useful for our guest, Taibo Wilhelms, and I'm sure will prove wise and useful for you as well. Just remember, the tricky part of that proverb is that trusting God doesn't always make sense in the moment, but if you trust him and lean not on your own understanding in the midst of uncertainty and trial, God will always prove faithful in the end. I'd like to extend a special thanks to Mr. Wilhelms for joining us on this episode and for sharing his story and experience with us all. As always, I'd also like to thank you for joining us today and hope that our conversation was a blessing to you and your walk with Jesus. New episodes of Equipped in Grace are posted every Wednesday at 8 a.m. Eastern Time, so be sure to subscribe or follow this show on the podcast app of your choice to be notified of our latest content. Until the next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Bye-bye.